So as promised, we told you, we took it all apart, out of the box, got you super excited. Now we're gonna show you how to put it back together because the sparking is actually a whole lot of fun, and I'm sure you guys are anxious to get seeing how this goes down. So, what do they do first?
Okay, first thing, you're gonna pull out your power supply out of the box. Okay, you got your power supply. This is always going to be, the stylus is always gonna be connected. That's why we gave that nice little holder so that you can just slide it right in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got our power supply. We'll then get the power cord and we wanna plug it in, right? So down here, there's a little silver hole to plug in your power supply. That's going to be simple, easy, just slide it in and you got your power ready to go. You'll notice that there's a couple other things. Your power switch here, this you'll see is a little bit round for the grounding and for all the tools, right? Technical.
Yes.
And then this little one is for our Argon tubing that we will show you how to connect.
And the other one you can utilize to link up your safety screen, your protective eye stuff, or like I said before, if you don't love utilizing this, feel free to use the darkening glasses.
We did see on the, as we see the screen as well, you'll have a connection here, which will also provide a light on this little screen. The other thing is on the back of this one, you can put your stylus right in the back if you're wanting to get used to holding it with two hands, the chain, and then bringing that up to the stylus, which we can go over.
So as you guys practice, see what he's saying right here? You can actually put this electrode right inside this, squeezing it inside there, holding the electrode so that you can just bring your chains up here and create your zap, giving you a little bit extra stabilization and another hand in the process.
Exactly. Okay, so now once we have the power, I'm going to go ahead and connect my Argon tubing. All I'm going to do, this is a easy thing, push it in as far as you can go and then give it a little tug to make sure it doesn't come out. The secret to this little thing is it has teeth. When you go in there, it grabs it so it won't let it come out unless you push on the white button and then it will slide right out. Okay?
Yeah, so it has a white ring around it. As you push down on the white ring, those teeth release and you can pull it out. But you notice here, without pushing on that, this is nice and tight because we've all spent quite a bit of money on investing in this argon gas. We don't want any leaking going on or that sort of thing. We're always going to recommend that you close your gas. But in the case that you forgot to close it, we want to make sure that you've got a nice, airtight seal. This is the regulator that we showed you that you got in your kit. Go ahead and show them how to connect to the regulator and then go through to what the dials are reading and the opening and close. Let them have it.
Okay, perfect. So it's just like a propane tank on your back porch, right? It's gonna screw in, and then we recommend using a big crescent wrench to tighten that down. Sometimes when we turn it on, we'll hear a little bit of a leak. Tighten it just a little bit more. If that doesn't take care of it, then go grab some Teflon tape from the neighbor, from the local hardware store, wrap that around there really quick, and then put it back in, and you'll have that leak stopped, okay? So super easy, tighten it in, and then you have your knob, open and close, okay? Open it up, it's not going to leak as long as we have the Argon tube connected on the other side. Now this also has the same insert that's on the back of your welder. So you just push it in, give it a little tug, make sure it's not coming out. If you need to release it, push the button the exact same way and it'll release those teeth and you can pull your tubing out.
And actually for this whole process, when he starts talking Teflon tape and a crescent wrench, I was just like, Abe, when Abe didn't come, I called Zach. Anytime I needed this to be detached off the gas and put back on again, I just called one of them to take care of that part for me. And if your husband doesn't have a crescent wrench, let's just pray that your husband has a crescent wrench.
The neighbor would.
The neighbor would. Some man around the house gotta have some kind of crescent wrench in there. And then after you have this hooked up, it hooked to your thing, you can just set this right on the floor wherever you're going to be working. If you're taking your business on the run, I might even look for, there's some little easy, that like dollies, you know, like a dolly that you move heavy things with. There's some of those that collapse and fold down that are especially small. If I was going to be porting this thing around a lot, I might invest in a dolly and a few of those, what are they called? You strap down
just
motorcycles
little
with them on a
bungee
tray.
cords or-
Bungee cords. Strap a few bungee cords around it, and then you could have your box of your equipment in the one hand and literally be pulling this behind you. I just know when I've done different conventions and things, even though it's heavy, it's not so heavy you couldn't carry it into a home. It's not so heavy you couldn't carry it 50 yards. But if you were trucking through a convention center, through all those hallways and doing everything you have to do, this is going to get heavy, even if it's the only thing that you're carrying.
Yep.
Or call your husband, tell him you need that argon gas moved into your event.
Exactly. One thing that we do get a common question about argon, is it safe to be indoors? Yes, argon is in the air, and it's in the air that we breathe. So it is safe to be inside. Even if it's leaking, it's not a harm to you. So we've had some that run their hose clear outside, and it's outside, and they have to run outside in the rain to turn it back on. It is safe to be in your house right next to your table, and that is a common question we get all
You
the time.
can't smell it, it's not flammable, so it's not like the natural gas that's running your ovens or the things in your home that you do have to
Yep.
be careful with. This is an argon gas. Argon gas is completely harmless. The only way that this could injure you in any way is if there was something super, super sharp, and we're talking like a machete. If you took a machete and you whacked this thing, you might be able to break through the metal on it and turn it into a rocket. So
Yep.
keep the machetes somewhere else,
And you'll
not
be
next
good.
to your argon tank, and you have nothing to worry about, gals. Now, do you think when you're transporting this, because we have our argon thing here, would you take your regulator off if you were transporting your tank, or would you just leave it on? Do we have to worry about this breaking off or anything like
So
that?
not necessarily breaking off, but you can break the gauges. So
Okay.
that's a great question. If you can, just take that and pull it off and put your cap on it. Then you're not ever worried about the top being on there. Okay. It does. We are going to ship it with a cap. So it just screws on the top to protect that on and off switch as well.
So you might find that you want a crescent wrench if you're going to be mobile with that, so that you can just wrench that back on.
Yep.
Or I might sandwich it between I don't know, all the beach towels that have been to the pool and everything else and the stroller, and
Yeah.
make sure that it sits just right, and wrap a little beach towel around this, shove everything in my truck, pack it in around it because my truck's never empty, and just make sure that we didn't have a lot of movement there.
Yep.
But beware, these are plastic, they can be broken, so either remove it or treat it with caution.
Yep. And then on the gauges, let's go really quick on how to set this up. The left gauge here is going to tell you your pressure of what you're at. We recommend from Sunstone to be anywhere from that 5 to 8 range. You'll see there's a little 5 there, and then there's a 10. Go right in between it. How we get there is the twisting of the knob. You'll see the
You
pressure
have to
go
make
up.
sure this is on first.
Correct.
So
It
you
needs
got
to be
it, you
on
have
first.
a knob here that says open and close, so I'm going to open his gas. See, he would have forgotten that.
Yep.
What's
See,
a man without a really smart woman?
That's right. That's
That is
exactly right.
absolutely right.
So you'll see it jumped up to 10 because I was messing with the knob, okay? If you want to decrease it,
Which
here's
you
the-
do, you
what
recommend
do.
5 to 7.
What you'll have to do is you'll have to take your grounding piece, like we talked about, grounding wire, and just touch the electrode on the stylus. What that does is it engages the welder to release the gas, and then that will bring it back down, and then you can set that.
So we're going
that
to
pressure.
double check once we get our welder all set up.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to double check what our gas is doing with our welder to make sure that the pressure is accurate.
Yep.
But so far so good. Set that down. Let's
Okay,
get going.
let's do it.
This is not an exciting part, but it's a necessary part. So here's your stylus. We mentioned that you're going to have to put an electrode in it to create the spark, the zap, the bond.
Correct.
Show us how that all comes together. You guys have got,
Okay.
what are these tips called?
These are electrode tips.
Electrode tips. With electrode tips here, and take
Okay,
them out.
exactly. So we've made this to where the cap, just pull it off, and then you're exposing a brass collet is what we call it, right? Collet.
You're exposing a little brass thing. You're gonna twist it left.
Yep.
Put
Loosen
your,
it up, and I'm gonna take the electrode we had
it's
there.
right here, dude.
Oh, right there.
Yeah. I
Can't
put
get my
things.
fingers in there.
I put things back where they belong.
I'll let Hillary do it. I got big
Okay.
fingers.
So here's your tip. Note, you don't want to lose your lid to this because there are 5 replacements in here. So put the lid back on. He's going to slip that in there. If any of you guys have ever changed like a drill bit or something, it's much like that.
Much like it. A little hole goes in there, and then kind of tighten it up so it's not going to fall. The nice thing is, on our cone, we've kind of engraved right here, there's a line that's a little indented on the cone. If you can't see it, it's kind of hard with the lighting.
Right here. Because you'll notice on this electrode, if he loosens it up, I can leave this thing hanging out this long, or I can shove it all the way back in so that I'm just exposing a tiny part of it.
Correct.
We want to make sure, initially when they told me this, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I liked my tip out big and long because I felt like it wasn't so clunky. But the reason that you want to make sure that you have the tip exposed the exact length is because through this tip is where the argon gas is going to come. You need to make sure that your weld is close enough to the gas exposure that it utilizes it. Here I was, I had my tip all the way out. I'm like, this argon gas don't do nothing. I was pleasantly surprised when I actually did it correctly.
Made a difference.
So that is the reason that you want, and like he said, with that ring, you can go ahead and just measure, move it up here.
So what I do is I will put it right on the end where that electrode goes in, and you'll see that the line's coming in. So mine's right there, a little bit long. You will want it in there, not past there. That gives you the optimal range for the electrode.
So then you'll tighten that down exactly where it belongs. The tip of that pulls off with pressure and snaps back in with pressure. There's not, I mean, sometimes when I was playing with it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna break this thing, trying to get it off, thinking that I didn't have something unlocked. There's nothing really tricky to it. Apply a little bit of pressure, a little bit more if it's not slipping off, and then it'll just slip right back on.
And as a brand new electrode or a stylus, it's gonna be a little bit tighter than as you get used to it, as it gets worked in a little bit. So at first, you might have to pull on it really hard. It's not gonna break, I promise. We manufacture it that way, but as you work with it, it will loosen up. Okay, so once we have the electrode in their system, all we gotta do is turn on the machine.
Flip on the machine. You'll notice as you flip on the machine, you get a screen that looks like this. With the exception of the fact that all of you guys get a nice pretty looking screen because we are jewelry welders.
That's
Typically, it's girly females that like to do this kind of thing. Plus, it's the Plunder brand color. So you'll see that your screen is pink, and then this is what you see on your screen. I want you to go through, because I was having a really hard time. He told me, I called him back the first morning. I'm like, my machine's in standby. I can't get it out of standby. I can't get it to do anything. And he said, go ahead and push the power button and it'll flip out of standby. So then I would come in and I'm like, this is a touch screen like my phone. You know how Apple phones have that beautiful screen? You hardly have to touch it and it works. This screen does require a little bit more pressure to get it to recognize your finger there. So when it comes to waking it up out of standby, make sure that you're giving yourself a little bit more pressure on these dials to get them to move. Once I knew that, I'm like, my machine really does work.
Yeah.
But I was trying to do the whole Apple phone touch, and it's not quite that.
And if you get the screen that says, hey, your machine's in standby, push the OK at the bottom and then just push the power button on. That's all it's telling you is that it's still sleep mode. It's still not turned on, still not engaged. Simple, easy.
Yeah, and you might get it in between welds, or if, let's say, you're at a salon doing the permanent jewelry, you leave for lunch, you come back. It's just to protect that we're not pulling power all that time and utilizing your equipment any extra than need be.
Yep, exactly. So now I've got that. It's on, the stylus is ready, the electrode's ready. I'm going to plug in my ground. As Hillary talked on the previous video, this is what we need. It goes back to 9th grade science class.
Which I flunked, so I learned this all. I learned this all fresh a couple months ago.
So all I'm gonna do is plug it in. This is going to create the circuit with the electrode, and when I make that touch, you'll hear it engage and make that click and your gas turns on.
So because we're practicing on the little metal cards, instead of sitting and having to hold this thing, you could do that if you want, if you're comfortable doing that. If you would rather just ground that piece of metal that you're going to be utilizing for practice with that clip that will ground any piece of metal, you could take the practice metal that you have here, ground that tip to it, and then literally all you have to do is start touching it and you're going to start welding. Now let's say before you start welding though, because they do have this screen. So let's tell them how we plug in the screen. Because it's connected to your motherboard, the screen will actually turn on, light up, and I think it's good to utilize it when you're practicing or if you don't want to use safety eyewear in the future.
So on the back of the machine, you got an old phone jack. You know, we don't see them very often anymore, but it's the same cable. You plug it in and it's going to turn on some lights so that you have lights underneath this machine. Like we said, you can take this stylus and you can put it right in the back, which then gives you that stability and the extra hand to get those chained up to the end to touch your electrode.
Yeah. Before, this was the only place they had to store your stylus, and I absolutely hated it because I'd be welding and then I'd go, time to put this down, and I'd have to reach back behind this machine and try and find this hole to store it with. So we did that little add-on right on the side of your machine where that can actually hold your stylus. The only time you would need to be utilizing this, I think, would be in that learning process if you're wanting that extra hand to help stabilize.
Yep, exactly.
So how do we want to start showing them how it goes down? You've got that.
You got that.
You've got your card, you have it all grounded, you have your safety eyewear.
Got 2 pair.
Are you gonna wear it until you remember to blink, or are you gonna start wearing it?
I'm gonna start wearing it just so that I can show you exactly how it's gonna be. It's gonna be hard to see, but we look pretty like
Terminator.
Yeah, exactly, right? Okay, so now I have the card, I'm ready to go. Now, the best thing to do is all I'm gonna do is make this touch. When I touch, you'll hear it click and it will engage the weld. If I make a bad weld, meaning if I pull away from it, it's gonna give me a little bit of a beeping sound.
And lots of times you pull away because the spark can be intimidating.
It can.
So as you're learning, you're gonna get really close, and lots of times you're gonna pull away before it even happens. When you do that, the welder won't engage because it doesn't recognize that it's touching anything. So then I think your tendency is to overcompensate and go, I'm gonna make sure this tip stays exactly where I need it. You press a little bit too hard and you actually weld your tip
to the piece.
to the piece, whether it's an anklet, bracelet, or this piece of metal.
So it's a fine touch, okay? The secret to making a good weld is touch and then hold still, okay? If I touch and hold still, it's going to make a weld. I'm gonna go ahead and make a weld. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm gonna touch, hold still, and it's gonna make that blue flashing mark, right? As you saw, we weren't looking directly into it, but if you look into it, you might see a little blue spot.
Gotta put on the Terminator lenses.
Gotta put them on.
And the thing is, it's not so much that you're gonna see that blue spot in the moment and it's gonna be so annoying. And then it is annoying because you have this little black cloud falling around in your, but over time that can really damage your vision. So just take the precautions, use the screen, use the eyewear. You may never be somebody that can weld and not look at the weld. If you're that person, you must have the protective eyewear. I don't want, I don't want to be sending everybody to the eye doctor.
I would highly recommend.
And when I retire, I'm going to read lots of books, so I need to make sure that my eyes are taken care of.
Yeah. So now that we got this, okay, we're going to show you the angle, okay? The way that I like to do it is I want to make sure I come in perpendicular to this piece, and that goes for your chain, that goes for your jump rings, whatever you're welding. Come in at that perfect angle. If I do, it distributes the electricity in the right manner. So I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna make a nice little touch light, it's gonna make a blue spark, and then it's gonna leave me, over here. It's gonna leave me with a nice little weld that's gonna be. Now,
right now, he has his welder set at a 10 while you're practicing. The lower down you go in the settings on your motherboard, the smaller the weld spark will be. The higher up you go, the bigger the spark. Typically, as your chains get thicker, you need a little bit bigger weld to make it work. Again, we've done that guesswork for you here at Luxe Linx. When you get your chains, we have tested and proven the correct weld strength. You might have to go up one or down one from that recommendation, but for the most part, that should put you right in the zone of making the perfect weld.
Yeah, let me tell you, Hillary has done her background work. She did the hard stuff for you.
I drove these guys crazy.
No. She just did the work for you, so it's right where you need it to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so now we have that. We're ready to go. What we recommend, like Hillary, she's got a couple cards here that she practiced on and practiced on and practiced on.
Yes.
Take the time to fill up that card. Find out what it is. Find out your perfect angle. Find out your pressure.
And then I'm going to show you guys, because I'm still not as good at it. as he is. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to show you kind of what your practicing should look like. Again, we want to be perpendicular, barely touching, and when we do it sparks. However, when you guys are practicing, maybe I'm better than I thought I was, or maybe this electrode's just really sharp. Because sometimes when you're practicing, you're gonna overcompensate and push down harder. When you do that, you'll kind of see that your tip sticks to the metal. That will damage this sharp point, and we'll be showing you how to take care of that shortly. But I would just sit here, oh, I did it. You hear the gas, you hear the gas, you pull up. You hear the gas, wait to hear the spark, pull it directly out. I would fill these cards, like I said. I filled one and then I called Corbin and said, I would like another one after I got through the front and the back of this. But I do prefer practicing and really solidifying my consistency with the timing on this long before I get out the chains and start to go, now I gotta get my chains together and I have to get that electrode perpendicular to where they all connect.
Yep,
So,
and the cards help you with your pressure, right? It helps, like Hillary's saying, it's not gonna stick as you practice, you practice, you practice. So then when you come to a chain, it's nice and easy muscle memory.
and when I first got started, I'll tell you what, I couldn't do it without, I mean, you guys can see all my dark ones where my tips stuck. I called the guy, I'm like, I'm having a hard time. My tip's sticking every single time. What he recommended doing was holding the electrode in place and bringing the card to that electrode for it to spark. And see, we moved into standby, so we're gonna go ahead and click that.
No, you're not connected.
I'm not connected. Oh, I'm not grounded.
No.
Cardinal rule. Don't call these guys. Check, make sure you're grounded before you call them. So he recommended just holding that electrode up and bringing the card to it. And when I did that, it just came together easy. I guess I was really concentrating, putting too much pressure on that tip.
Once you've taken the time, you've used that card, filled it up, that's when you can go to the chain. That's when you can switch to either the pliers or the hemostats.
But if at any given time you start to notice on your card, your welds are getting big, they're sparking more than they should, chances are you guys will dull several of these tips before you ever fill one of these cards. So go ahead right now before we get to the chain and just show them how, this is where the Dremel comes in and that tip for sharpening. There is, you guys all received Sunstone Plunder workbooks for you all. On page 17 of the Safety and Guide Pulse Arc Welding Workbook, it actually goes through a nice tutorial on how to make sure you're sharpening that correctly, but go ahead and give it your best.
Okay.
Your best one.
So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it off like we did in the first, loosen up the nut, and then just pull the electrode out. Some may wanna just leave it in there. We highly recommend pulling out, and here's the reason why. Because when I'm sharpening electrode, I wanna get a nice even so that it comes to a point. I wanna spin that in my fingers. As you can see, I'm kind of rolling up my fingers. I wanna make sure that it's even on the end of that electrode. So best thing, take your diamond disc that will come with the electrodes and put it in your Dremel. When I turn on the Dremel, I'm gonna come at an angle to where it's pulling it off of the front. And on 17, it'll tell you exactly what angle to come at. So what I'm gonna do is just put it down there. It's like sharpening a pencil. It's like going back to elementary school once again.
And really when I started, I was like, well, if I'm not getting a weld, I'll just come at my weld kind of sideways. So if I had my sheet here and I wasn't getting a weld, I thought, well, if I create more surface area here where they're touching, for sure, I'll get a better weld. No. It doesn't work like that. The tighter your point is, the more perpendicular it is to exactly where it needs to be, the prettier that weld. So don't try and be like me, all like, I don't want to change my tip, I don't want to change my tip. Now I'm just going to use the side of my tip. Now I'm going to rotate to this side because ultimately you just need that sharp point. And as your chains get more delicate, like your links are smaller, it becomes increasingly more important that that tip is absolutely tight and sharp.
Yep.
You can maybe get away with one that's a little bit duller if your jump ring is a heavier one, but especially on those light, dainty welds, you're gonna want a sharp tip.
Yep, exactly. One pro tip too, a lot of very experienced jewelers that use these all the time, they'll actually sharpen both ends. So you got sharp point on both ends, so that if you need to sharpen it, all you gotta do is pull it out and flip it over, and you got a sharp tip on the other end.
Yeah. And if you really wanted to spend a whole day not sharpening, I mean, I think there would be time in between your welds and different things. You could go through all 5 of them, sharpen both sides so that you didn't even have to sharpen in between, depending on what kind of scenario you're in.
Yep, and honestly, and how much experience you spent practicing too. That'll change as you go on.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's get tricky. Let's show them this practice chain we've got here.
All right. So practice chain, once we go to our chain, we're gonna look at these links. They're pretty small, they're pretty fine. This is stainless steel, it's kind of a harder steel. But the nice thing that Hillary went for was the hemostats, right? I'm gonna show you how to connect those hemostats. When I come up, all I'm gonna do is just push it in there, and now I have my chain. It's connected, it's ready to go. I don't have to worry about moving that around. I can get the perfect angle on my electrode.
But
and
you
I
better
have
go
that.
ahead and ground that.
Correct.
If you don't ground that, you don't get a spark. Before you call us saying, "My machine's broken," just do one last final check, because you guys saw me make
Yep,
the
yeah.
mistake
It
earlier.
happens. It
And
happens.
make sure that you're grounded.
So, and you don't have to ground this. You can also ground the chain. It's whatever you want to do. As long as it's grounded somewhere on the piece, whether it's your tools, whether it's your handle, or whether it's the chain, it needs to be grounded.
Yeah. And again, what I liked about this is you're locked in. You're not moving anywhere on that chain. You don't have to worry about gripping it tightly. When we came up with, when I started utilizing the hemostat, I'm like, I think I could weld it anything,
Yeah.
even those itty bitty things.
As long as you can hold it and the stability of it.
Yep. So let's go ahead. You said that these were all welded. So in order to put them back together again, I'm going to go ahead and take these links right here that I have in my hand. And I'm going to go ahead and clip that so that one side of that link is open. Clip the end of that chain. And then if you saw the last video about twisting, never really opening, you're gonna take your pliers here, you're gonna go ahead and twist this chain so that it opens. Another part. Twist this chain so that it's nice and open. So you guys can see, twisted that chain, it's good and open there. So let's show them what it looks like as you put that back together and weld it. Again, he's gonna use the hemostats. You guys might wanna use the hemostats to get started. If you don't, you can use the grounded needle nose pliers. You can get it straight, then come in and zap it.
See, that's why you use the hemostat.
That's why you use the hemostat. See, he thought it was just would be super cool. Pushing all down, ready to go. All of a sudden, the chain slipped. It doesn't seem like it would be that hard or that annoying, but it just is.
It just, sometimes it just, depending on the chain as well.
Well, and depending on your experience level.
Yep, which I'm not very experienced, so we'll give it to Hillary.
Yeah.
Say, once I have this in, I want to make sure that this link is touching. Because what the issue is, if it's open, so say this is the link, if it's open like this, all my energy goes into one side and it pulls it away. So I need to make sure that these are touching. The benefit of the hemostat is it gives you that control where you can come in with another piece, close that jump ring, and then you're ready to take your stylus.
Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys a little bit closer where he did that. You've got your jump ring here. He went ahead. You guys can see the seam in it right here where it was once open. He's closed that down. Now, if it's closed down, you'll get a pretty weld. Sometimes you think you've closed it. I always do a second check with my links, and if I'm looking at it this way and I go, my link is closed, I'm good, I can't tell you how many times I've looked at it from the top and the depth is entirely off. That is where you guys need to make sure. I started sporting some reading glasses when I did this, but we also have included the magnifying glass in here. Believe it or not, that gets really small and hard to see at times. So utilize your magnification to make sure, because it's not just those links that have to come together, but then that electrode has to hit perpendicularly right where those two links are touching in order to create a beautiful weld.
Yep, exactly. So I'm gonna go ahead and make that weld. Like Hillary said, as I come in like this, I just wanna touch. Find any stability you can. You see, I put my fingers together, or I'll hold the end. You can hold your fingers pretty close because it's very small weld and very small heat infected zone. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna touch one time.
Blink.
Made a blink, close the chain, and it's good to go.
Did you really get it that fast? See, and that is an absolutely perfect weld. If you guys are wondering, because sometimes it's maybe not, it wasn't quite closed and the weld didn't work, I recommend always going back through, like if it was a customer. Again, here at Luxe Linx Splendor, we will guarantee your chains. No tarnishing, no discoloring. Your responsibility is to guarantee the welds. So sometimes a weld can be more brittle or not quite as strong as another weld. I always go back through and test mine to make sure that it's nice and strong. If it's nice and strong, you can just wiggle that hoop, it doesn't come open. If it's not, and I don't even know if your weld here is very strong. Actually, his weld is very strong. So when he wiggles like this, the chain's not gonna come open. If you wiggle like this and you hear a snap, you had a weld that wasn't ideal. That weld's not strong enough that you're gonna wanna send your patron out the door with it. So I always go back through and just do a little wiggle and test there.
And if it does come apart, weld it again. If you can't get them lined up, take that link out and cut one more or add another jump ring to make sure that weld's tight.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
All right, so you guys get practicing. I think you know everything there is to know, with a few exceptions. We're all a little bit different. For me, I struggled more with seeing. I prefer the magnifying glasses over the magnifying lens. Some of you guys will prefer utilizing the screen over utilizing the protective eyewear. Just really create a space that you can keep nice and clean, and then I would recommend developing a rhythm for yourself. So if you sit down and your electrode and machine is always on the right side of your body, always leave this electrode on the right side of your body, because your muscle memory will go, I need it, I need it. The quicker you establish where everything belongs, the quicker your body can start to memorize where to pick everything up. So try to not get started like a hot mess. Be a little bit systematic in what feels comfortable, and then setting up the same way every time.
Yep, exactly. And that might be where the screen comes into utilization as you start, okay? If I put this electrode in here, I hold it like this, I can bring my piece up with my fingers to make that. This is making the weld as stable, but I'm controlling it with the two wires, and I bring it up and I touch here. So try that, get you started. If you're having a hard time closing those jump rings and getting a good weld, this is a good alternative to make sure that those jump rings are closed as you come up, adding a little pressure.
So what he's saying, you can ground that chain, and instead of concerning yourself with holding that stylist, I would, if it was me and I wasn't in a hurry and I remembered, I would grab my hemostat, I'd lock it in like that so it was good and tight, close down my jump ring, and then instead of bringing the welder to the link, I can bring that. Ooh, come on now. This is a long ways away, and I don't have my readers on, Corbin. I did it.
And we're both moving around.
And we're both moving around.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I totes did it. And that, Corbin, check it out. It's beautiful.
Made that nice.
It's a beautiful weld. So you guys have so much to look forward to. I really feel like in this industry right now, everybody's jonesing for this permanent. And really, even if I wasn't loving the permanent concept, I love the idea of having a necklace on that doesn't constantly spin because my closure is heavier than the rest of the chain. There are all kinds of reasons to jump on board. Once you guys perfect your welds, understand your equipment, really the sky's the limit.
It really is. And we don't know. Us guys don't know, but you guys know what you need. You know what chains will work. You know what looks good. We're here for the welder and the technical side. So
and I'm
don't
here
hesitate.
to take care of that other part. But of course, we're always open to suggestions.
Yep.
Good luck. Get started. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We're out.